A very good evening to all of our viewers and very warm welcome from Guyana and around the world to Globespan 24/7. We are pleased to bring you tonight's program called Dialogue with You. Thanks to Mr. Nohar Singh of Globespan for making this platform available, and of course to Devin Bisu, our technical specialist. This evening, we are very honored and privileged to have with us for the second time, the Honorable Vice President of Guyana, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo. Dr. Jagdeo, welcome to Dialogue with us on Globespan.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be on the program.
And of course, with me is the indomitable co-host, Dr. Asquith Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome.
Good evening, Charles, and good evening to you, Dr. Jagdeo.
Mr. Vice President, today our program was geared towards discussing the achievement of the government after 10 months in office. But circumstances have dictated that we address the situation on the ground. As all our viewers know, Guyana have experienced what we can describe as a monstrous level of rainfall in our history, as was reported by the President. I know in 2005, we had a devastating flood, and that was under your watch. Today, we are caught up again with another devastating flood. Mr. Vice President, first thing, has the rain subsided? And two, what is the forecast for rainfall for the month of June? And what is happening on the ground as we speak tonight?
Well, you're absolutely correct that we have had unusual levels of rainfall. And combined with that, we have had extremely high tides. And tomorrow, the next wave of high tides would start. That's what I'm told. So it will complicate matters further in terms of draining many of the areas still underwater. Just to get the perspective, and this is all related to what we've been saying about climate change, that you can go for long periods with normal amounts of rain, and then suddenly in a season or in a year, you have unusual amount of rainfall. Sometimes what you get in a single night will be more than the average for the month in a normal year. And you know our circumstances here in Guyana, we are below sea level. Our drainage system often is not the perfect one, and we depend heavily on the change in tides and that window to drain the land. So when you have that unusual amount of rainfall, then it has to accumulate somewhere. And unfortunately, this has happened in many of our villages and communities. Compounding that, and often you do not see the rainfall. So many people who live on the coast, they say, okay, we've had heavy rain, but we're not seeing that much rainfall like in another year. Well, a lot of this rain often is in the upper part of the country, in the savannas, in the mountains, etc. And so when rain falls heavily in these areas, it has to come down the river. And that is why you see some of the communities like Kwakwani, Campbelltown, Bururu, all the villages on the Berbice River, in Region 9, in Region 8, that people who live too close to the communities in 7-2, close to the river, the banks of the river have overflown, and sometimes you have in excess of 20 feet of water below the normal level. So some homes are practically covered, and we have had to, like in the Kwakwani area, we have 4 shelters there that the government is providing everything for, and with over 100 persons in shelter there. So the forecast is still a bit iffy. We're hoping that the rains will subside and that we can return to economic activities. Given that we are going on Thursday to the Parliament for supplementary provisions to address the flooding issue of $10 billion. We're seeking supplementary provision. This will help us to address infrastructure that has been damaged, roads that have been washed away, other bridges, etc. It would help us to give enough help to the farmers, the miners, the others, all of those who have had their livelihood disrupted, so we can give them some help to get back to productive activities. And of course, it would assist us in continuing to provide, immediate assistance. That's hampers, etc. We have given out about 15,000 hampers so far through the CDC, but the needs are greater. So on Thursday, we'll be seeking a supplementary provision for $10 billion to assist us with the flooding. If you recall, in 2005, ECLAC did a study, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and they found that the impact of that flood was we lost about 59, the equivalent of 59% of gross domestic product. And I suspect that now were we to do a similar assessment, you would see a massive loss in gross domestic product. But more importantly, this loss represents a devastating impact at the personal level, because people see their entire livelihood washed away or damaged, and they can't get back to economic activities very soon. So I can understand the level of frustration, I can understand the concern that people have, but I can assure them that the government will assist, like we did in the past, to ensure that we overcome this period of tragedy, personal tragedy, for so many of our people. You would recall also that because of the experience of 2005 and other years, I recall going with Dr. Jagan in Mahaica and Maikoni in the early floods when he just became president, 93, 94. And the water was so high in many of those areas, and the water came from the conservancy, the conservancy here in Region 4. Because at that time, there was when the conservancy dam was threatened, which could flood the whole of East Coast and Georgetown if the dam broke. There was no choice but to release the sluices and blow the water into the Mahaica River, which then moved right across Mahaica, Maikonia, Bari, and flooded out the entire area. So just imagine, and there was no solution for it, because you had to release the water or else the conservancy dam would broke. And I made a commitment when I was president that later that we will try to fix this. And we built the Hope Canal. Today, Region 4 is the least affected. Georgetown and East Coast are not affected as badly as any other region. They have minor areas, etc. But just imagine if we didn't have the Hope Canal, what would have happened? We'd probably be flooded out in Region 4, and in Region 5, they would have already been underwater. They're already maybe suffering now, but it would have been much earlier because we would have had to release the water from the High Conservancy into the Mahaica River. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And I recall the grief we had when we built that. We had a group of engineers from the professional association who were saying, this canal will never work. It's a PPP thing. The GHRA, imagine the human rights organization, called on us to stop the canal. Of course, APNU, PNC at that time didn't want the canal built. And the first person to turn the switch on the canal was Mr. Holder from APNU when it was built. The minister at that time. So we have to plan for the future. I'm told in Berbice that we want to open up more lands for cultivation, but by opening up lands in the savannas, people are growing rice there now. The backwater from the savannas are coming down through the settlements. So we have to now find a solution by building bypass canals, where if we want to open up more lands in the inner depth of the country, so you can bypass the settlement and take water out directly to the Atlantic Ocean. And we are considering that even now. So there are a lot of lessons to be learned and a lot of money that we have to, well, infrastructure we have to put in to mitigate the impact of future flooding because of climate change. And this will happen in with frequency, that you would have high intensity rainfall that would lead to accumulation.
Thank you, Mr. President. And in your discussion, you mentioned that this flood, in the 2005 flood, as you indicated, was about over 50% of GDP was wiped out. This one is likely to be higher. So I was wondering if the 10 billion that you're going to Parliament with is sufficient, or you'll have to go back to Parliament for additional funding, in your view?
No, the loss of output is slightly different than the assistance that we accord to return to economic output. So that loss of output was the equivalent of 59% of GDP. So, for example, the rice that we have, a lot of young rice now in Region 5 that's under threat, and we may lose it. So we will probably have to help people. We don't have now, we are looking at seed, good seed for replanting. We may not have adequate numbers, so we may have to skip this crop, but we're already starting to look at planting material, etc. And not only for rice, but for other areas, livestock losses, etc. So we can work with people. So we believe at this point in time, it will be adequate. The infrastructure damage is much greater. So apart from the 10 billion, we do have additional supplementary sought for infrastructure that in areas that were totally neglected. For example, Blackbush Polder Road, totally neglected. Almost all the areas that were pro-PPP, the roads were just left to disappear practically. And so we are going to, the Zealot Road, the Canals Road were paved up to a certain part. I gather where APNO support ended, the road ended. And so we have to do both Canal number 1, Canal number 2, Mahaika to King Grove, Blackbush Polder. So you'll see in the supplementary provisions that those infrastructure work would also be in here.
Okay, great, Mr. President.
The hinterland roads too would be huge, like some of the crossings that are just washed away. Many of the approaches to Amerindian communities or the roads leading to these communities are gone. So we have to find resources to do all of that, to rebuild everything. And we will do it. Whether if this 10 billion is not adequate, we have created in the short period enough dynamism and fiscal space, I think, to address in the 10 months period of the government.
And we'll want to talk about some of those, Mr. President. But as you mentioned, there were great talk of moving inland into Guyana. And now that the flood has affected a lot of the hinterland region, this might be a blessing in disguise, not to say flood is good, but to tell us how the future planning in the hinterland should be to ensure that if we move inland, we know where the irrigation should be and so on. So maybe this might be an eye-opener for us as well.
Yes, but you know, in the hinterland, like along the coast, people have developed settlement patterns, and often the settlements follow the rivers. And therefore, they build their homes and communities on the banks of the river for obvious reasons. Water, they need water, navigational purposes, etc. So when in a normal period, they may be 20 feet above the normal level of the river. But when the water comes up 25 feet, now it would affect these communities.
Without
So
doubt. Yeah.
definitely settlement factor of the future global warming and climate change and these issues.
Thank you. Dr. Rose?
Good evening, President Jack Dale. And I want to tell all our listeners tonight that we do not ask questions to trick any one of our guests. We ask questions based on the fact that our guest will explain to the people what the problems are or what the solutions to the problems are. So tonight, Mr. Vice President, I want to ask you, since taking office 5 months ago, can you briefly explain to the Guyanese people what are the three or four or five major achievements of your government?
Well, first of all, if you look at the first budget, I'm gonna list and you do the count, okay? So APNU had taken away 1.67 billion from the kids of the country. That was the $10,000 cash grant, claiming they could not afford it. The PPP has restored that and increased it to $15,000 now. So that will put in the pockets of their parents now in excess of $2.5 billion this year. In addition, we have doubled the school uniform grant to $4,000. So that will put an additional $450 million in the pockets of their parents. So that immediately there is a transfer of about $3 billion to the children of our country and their parents. We have increased the pension by 25%. That would put over $4 billion more. 25% is equivalent to just over $4 billion in the pockets of the pensioners of this country this year. We have restored the water cash grant to the subsidy for pensioners for water that APNU took away from them, and that will put probably $500 to $600 million in the pockets of the pensioners that they don't have to pay now for water. We have reversed the value-added tax on building material. So this is a benefit to people who are building. We have reversed the value-added tax on water, on electricity. There should be billions of dollars more that people are paying. They don't have to pay now on diapers, on food items, etc. We have reversed the drainage and irrigation charges that went from $3,500 to $15,000 per acre per year in, say, the Region 5. It went back to the level before. So that the farmers there have a benefit. We removed the VAT from machinery and equipment, so all of that they put on. So the miners, the farmers, etc. Now, if they bring in an excavator, combine, etc. We have, so if you look at all of that, annualize, it's about $40 billion of benefit that people are paying in taxes back in their pockets. We have removed the corporate tax from education. So it means that if any private investor in New York, any from the diaspora, or anywhere in the world, comes to Guyana and sets up a school here at any level, they set up a university in Guyana, they don't have to pay the corporate tax. So the gross profit becomes net profit. We've done the same thing for health services. So if you set up a lab, a hospital, etc., you do not pay corporate tax. I can take you through how many we're counting already. We have started cleaning up. On the other hand, we had a lot of cleaning up to do. So we've had to do an audit, and we have had to destroy nearly $15 billion of expired drugs that APNU corruptly bought and that was sitting in the bond. And now we're in the process of replenishing our bonds across the country so people can go back to the pre-APNU period, the pre-2015 period when they could get basic drugs. It's a difficult challenge. It's costing us billions of dollars. We have to go for a $2 billion supplementary this year because we're just cleaning out all the old drugs from the bond. And that is why if you go to some parts of the country, people still don't have, although we've been in office for a while, it is taking time to clean that up. In the Berbice area, we had an assessment of the health centers. Total neglect. We now have in this budget now and the supplementary provision some $500 million to buy equipment for the hospitals there and also to fix up facilities. We've seen some cases where people go and they don't have any place to sit and wait outside, or it's muddy, and more polyclinic was run down. I'll share with you some images because all of these were what we've been addressing. We have now looked at a 5-year plan. We're doing financing for the 5 years plan. On the job front, we have made a ton of progress. We started to restructure Gaisuko. We're working on the local content issues. I can tell you about 100 things we have done, major things that will impact people's lives, not just poor, And so I don't want to spend all night talking about it.
Okay, I got it. Long before independence, Mr. Vice President, Guyana's been divided along racial lines, especially between the two races, Indo and Afro-Guyanese. And in every general elections, all the parties have campaigned and now they will bridge the racial divide. What has your government done so far and will continue to do to bridge this racial divide in Guyana?
So, Steve, the thing is that to look at the whole issue of racism in Guyana, any person who is unbiased, who is objective, will seek to examine the policy making of governments when you're in office, because it is your policy that reflects whether you're serious about development for the entire country or just one group of people. You can't go to rhetoric, because rhetoric, anybody, politicians can spout rhetoric any single time. So let us examine the policy making of the two governments. I have in opposition and now even in government been saying that we are willing to have a fact-based debate with APNU about how Afro-Guyanese fared under various governments. APNU had 28 years in office, PNC, and then 5 years between 2015 and 2020. And the PPP had been in office for 23 years and now back in office. I can say to you, without any of the statistics, you have a huge feedback there. I can hardly hear myself. So
yeah, go on, Doc. Yeah.
I can, without any fear of contradiction, that the evidence will substantiate what I'm saying. That Afro-Guyanese did better under the People's Progressive Party tenure in office than under APNU. I can say this without any contradiction. Let's examine access to land, housing, Black-owned businesses in Guyana, and the acquisition of assets, etc. You will see that the statistics point to that fact that Afro-Guyanese have fared better. They've made more progress in terms of material well-being as well as rights agenda under the People's Progressive Party. So the People's Progressive Party was the one that amended our constitution, changed the constitution when we were in office, to provide an ethnic relations commission that has powers of sanction over the executive. No country in this hemisphere has that. And the Ethnic Relations Commission can prohibit a party from contesting an election if they were to use people's race as mobilizing factor. Very few countries in the world or governments have had the confidence to do that. We have had it because we know our policies are grounded on national development and are not race-based. When you look at further evidence, I can point to major developments. Look at Linden, Amelia's Ward, the housing scheme, Block 22, the roads, the new hospitals, new housing, the new water treatment plant, all built under the PPP. You ask APNU what their legacy in Indo-Guyanese communities have been. They just had 7,000 sugar workers sent home. Of course, people of all races, but predominantly Indo-Guyanese. That is their legacy. You know, in the Burnham period, when villages were skipped for electricity because of when they supported the PPP. People were discriminated against on race. And now APNU has started once again with this reverse sort of racism. It goes this way. If I can accuse the other party enough of racism, the attention will be on them. And they do this through their parties and their surrogates. So let us look at that. APNU has been accusing us of ethnic cleansing. Now, look at the permanent secretaries in 2015. They look like Guyana. It was a mixed group of people of every race when the PPP was in office. When APNU came into office, they ethnically cleansed their permanent secretary. One of all of the permanent secretaries remained Indo-Guyanese. One Indo-Guyanese. You look again at the current configuration of permanent secretaries, and you will see that it looks like Guyana. That is how the PPP operates. And that is why we have no fear of being examined in this regard. So APNU is the most racist party internally and in its policies. Its history is one based on ethnic politics. When in government, it practices racism, and out of government, it practices reverse racism by claiming the other side is racist to avoid scrutiny of its own policies. And we are going to scrutinize carefully, publicly, their policies, because for too long they got away with that. And I hope that you too, Askit and Globespan and the others, will take this up to look at their policies of this racism.
I promise you will. Before my colleague comes back in, I want to ask you this question. All the parties in 2020 campaign on constitutional reform. Are you in favor of constitutional reform? If yes, will it happen before the next election?
I am in favor of what we promised clearly in our manifesto. We made it clear that constitutional reform doesn't belong to any political party. The Constitution belongs to the people of this country. And the PPP made a commitment, like it did in the early period, that we will establish a constitutional reform body that will be made up of the government, the opposition, and members of civil society that will go across this country and have consultations with all the communities, that will invite people in to make presentations. They will then present a report, and if our people, the people of Guyana, all of them, or if 800,000 out of them, they want changes, then we will support the changes. But the change can't be made because one political party believes it's convenient for them to adjust something. The Constitution belongs to the people, and we promise a process, and we will embark shortly through a parliamentary mechanism on that process. That is what we did in the early 2000s, and I dare say that we have today one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. You show me any constitution in the world that has 5 rights commissions, where you have to have 2/3 support of the National Assembly to sit on those rights commissions. And many of them have powers of sanction over the executive. Very few countries in the world, if any, would have that sort of feature in their constitution with an independent mechanism of administration, etc. Those are the Human Rights Commission, the Ethnic Relations Commission, Indigenous people, children, and gender. And then we have, you tell me which country has a public procurement commission to oversee procurement. I can go through all the features. We departed from the Westminster model, where we then put in an American type system where you have 4 standing committees. We could have done like what is done in the United States, taking chairmanship of all the committees, because whoever has the majority chairs the committee. We enshrined in the last constitution a sharing, that the government chairs 2, the opposition chairs 2, and then we rotate. That was a form of power sharing right there. The committees have great powers because they can summon ministers, etc. We reduced the powers of the president. We dealt with how constitutional agencies are treated. And the public police service, public service, teaching service, and judicial service commissions, how they are appointed, and greater input from parliament. And so I see the crocodile tear being shed about Paul Slow again. Paul Slow can never take paid employment from the police. He's the chairman of the Public Service Commission. He's paid handsomely for that job. He has supervisory authority over the police and then takes paid work from the police. Never mind, they never completed the work because the work was already done. But that is wrong in itself. And so if you're talking about constitutional reform, that is what our approach is. Now, a lot of people have been asking, what about the model for GCOM? And in the international community often says we should have a purely technical body. But you recall what happened in the last elections, and we had to point this out to them. If we didn't have the 3-3-1 formula, then most likely the elections would have long been over, and APNU would have been in government now through rigged elections, because it was the technical staff, the professional staff, in a sarcastic way, that tried to steal elections. Lowenfield, Mingo, and Roxanne Myers. And today, suddenly, the 3 persons who tried to steal elections, when you tried to get rid of them, in another country, they would have already been in jail. They would have been in jail in another country. Now it's racism. So we are in favor of that process on constitutional reform, but we are not going to tell people what they want. The people of this country are smart enough, and those who live in the diaspora are smart enough to know what they want, but they must also know what's already been changed, because we made great progress on constitutional reform in the past, another commitment that the PPP had since in 2000, and we fulfilled it.
Okay, Charles, over to you.
Mr. Vice President, you're so eloquent in your answers. I can sit here and just listen to you without asking your question, but we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion. So please stay tuned.
AllFromOneSupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all U.S. states. Our shoppers choose the best items packaged nicely and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all U.S. states.
Are you ready for the first ever Globespan Curry Duck Curry competition in Punta Cana, DR, along with cricket and Tassa, brought to you by Globespan, allfromonesupplier.com, Dave's West Indian and Abby Tunes Radio. Your all-inclusive getaway includes non-stop flights, 4 nights hotel, resort services, unlimited food, drinks, and exciting live entertainment, including Tassa, Marissa, DJ Sean, Randy, NRTG, and me, Terry G, the Bangali Babu, alongside surprise guest performers. Call Globespan 212-243-0865 or book online at globespan.com. Punta Cana, Dokore, Punta Cana, Corridor, get on fire!
Folks, the Nest Restaurant is the place to dine for Guyanese and Caribbean dishes. It is the best restaurant in Queens. The staff is courteous, and Dave, the owner, is always there to welcome you. So for a memorable dining experience, visit the Nest Restaurant located at 12717 101 Avenue, South Richmond Hill. Go and make a reservation today or takeout. Call 718-847-4035. For all your plumbing, heating, and cooling needs, call Zim Mechanical Inc. at 347-456-8885. Zim Mechanical Inc. installs boilers, hot water heaters, and cooling systems. Located at 9732 Waltham Street, Jamaica, Queens, Zim Mechanical Inc. also repairs and troubleshoots your gas, heating, and cooling systems. For quotes on prices and repairs, call 347-456-8885.
Welcome back to our audience as we have with us the Honorable Vice President, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo. Dr. Jagdeo, you went into details of when Dr. Rose asked you about the racial problem in Guyana. I just want to share quickly before we move on, is that when President Ali made that speech on the arrival day, there was some confusion or some, controversy as to what he said. And I believe that both the African, the slavery and the indentureship, they suffer, but without doubt, the Africans who came to Guyana suffered tremendously. And there is no way we can put a value to that. So I think your job now, Mr. VP, is to ensure that the African community, they're embraced and welcomed. So together, we can develop Guyana. And I'm sure that is the policy of President Ali and yourself as well. Having said that, Mr. Vice President, I have to bring up this in the discussion. There are several debates going on now about the production sharing agreement with ExxonMobil and the other partners with the government of Guyana. Mr. Vice President, do we have a good contract with Exxon?
So before I answer that question, let me just finish making my coffee here. So
that is what keeps you up.
To the first comment that you made about President Ali speaking on arrival day about the sufferings of our people. And this was arrival day the president was speaking about. He was speaking about the shared agony of our ancestors in the colonial period. He was not attempting to compare who suffered most. And clearly, being kidnapped, placed on ships without your consent, sold is abominable, and it should be condemned everywhere. It's the Holocaust of African people, the slave trade. And we recognize that and the contribution that Afro-Guyanese have made to Guyana. The president was speaking on arrival day, saying our ancestors went through a lot. But they had to find a diversion from what the Amanza Desir said about Indo-Guyanese. He said Indo-Guyanese are mentally lazy people. A racist statement. So suddenly it became about what President Ali said, who was recognizing the shared agony of our people and saying we're happy that they made progress, they've overcome all of these challenges in the past. And they have all contributed to nation building. But the racism is what they were trying to hide. And just imagine a PPP person saying that Afro-Guyanese are mentally lazy. How they would have killed that person by now with the comments and everything else, cause for resignation, etc. But she obfuscated the issue, gave a half-hearted explanation of some that even exacerbated the comments that she made, that she was talking about PPP people, etc. And it went on basically all the rights groups suddenly gave her a free pass. That would not have happened had she been a PPP member of parliament. But this is the racism of APNU. Every day, rather than now, Harman going out to calm people and talk to them about the flooding and want to work with the government to alleviate the flooding, they're on a campaign, including Burke and the others, saying that PPP not giving assistance to Afro-Guyanese community. We've been everywhere in Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese community, in regions that supported the PPP and those that did not support the PPP. Right now, I told you about the only place we have shelters must be in Tapatinga, in Region 9, and in the Kwakwani area, in Hururu, Kwakwani, Campbelltown area. So, and we have over 100 people in those shelters, all taken care of by the government. If you look at the hampers distributed by the CDC, and you look at the statistics, Region 10 has a significant amount of those. But they live the racism every single day, and they attempted to drag President Ali into the dirt, into the grimy kind of situation that they constantly wallow in. So right now, that's all they're talking about, racism. You see the thing about GWI. Now, Van West Charles left an agency there that had $7 billion of debt to GPL, found an agency that was in good financial health, doing well, expanding water supply to the country, left it in $7 billion of debt to GPL, another $900 million to suppliers, spent about 50-something million on a party, O'Leary's party, over 50 million on travel, another 50 million on food per year. This is food for some of the big guys. Was renting a separate office apart from the office he had. Bought about $1.8 billion of questionable material from questionable suppliers. And moved the employment from 500 to 1,300, 500 to 600 to 1,300 persons. Now, our philosophy is to get people employed, but to productively, not to stack up agencies where you can't pay them. Now, we have to find ways of observing those people back into the economy. But that is what he did, and it's all political patronage. Left a bankrupt agency. And now it's racism because you move employment not by 25%, not by 50% in 5 years, by over 100%. And then you also, the service declined in the period, and you created a bankrupt agency. When we're trying to fix it now, it's about racism. So this is, I had to deal with that issue first of all. And then coming back to the PSA, I have repeatedly said that the PSA is not a PSA that the PPP would have supported or given approval. We have commented publicly under the circumstances in which that PSA was hurriedly signed. Truckman was advised not to sign it. He got Exxon partly drafted the PSA. They handed it to him, and he was advised not to sign it, and he did sign it. And then the Global Witness said, when he was questioned by Global Witness in some newspapers, he said he was told to sign it. He has not mentioned who told him to sign it up to today. But the contract has several features that he would wish to change. Now, we have made it clear that because we don't want litigation, and that because there is in such an environment some sanctity of contracts, that we are not renegotiating the PSA for the Stabroek block. But when Exxon comes along for a PSA for Kaishore and Kanchi blocks that they're operators for, then they will have an entirely different PSA, a model PSA that we're working on now that will correct the deficiencies of the PSA that the Stabroek block had, including ring fencing provisions and matters dealing with royalties and taxes and production bonus, etc. So we have made that very clear about our approach. We have not hid anything from the beginning. And we said this in opposition. What I'm telling you here is what I said in opposition. And we defended our position.
Okay, but Mr. Vice President, is the PSA, as you said, is for the entire Stabroek block?
Yes, for the Stabroek block, yes.
Okay.
So all the developments under the Stabroek block would be subjected to that PSA.
Okay.
So when I saw somebody said, "Oh, the PPP signed this," they were thinking about Payara. Payara, we only gave a development approval to develop that project, but it was not the PSA that was signed. It was the development of the Payara project under the PSA, right? Because you have LISA 1, LISA 2, Payara, and now Yellowtail that they sought approval for. And look at what we did on the Payara license. You will see the Payara license is vastly superior to the licenses issued for LISA 1 and LISA 2. You just have a look at them and you will see. I don't want to go into all the provisioning here, but serious provisioning, including providing funding for monitoring standards and stuff like that, $2 million to do that, to monitor standards. And then the Payara environment.
We got Devin, the VP. I think we have a break with the VP.
Just give it 1 minute to reconnect.
Okay. And viewers, as we await the Vice President, we want to thank you as he's discussing with us the production share agreement that for the last few days, there's been quite a write-up in the newspaper, both sides, professionals writing for and against it. Mr. VP, we miss you. Yeah.
Yes, so I was telling you about you lost the network.
Yeah.
So the license, the Payara environmental permit had provisions for fines should, in fact, it prohibited flaring and they're beyond a certified period or under approved circumstances, and then a carbon-related fine as penalties, plus a fine for loss of use. Now that's very advanced, and many people who are talking about the LISA permit, we recently amended that permit to now charge a fee above a certain level, that at $30 per ton, which is a high of CO2 equivalent, which is a high level of fine. We will collect in the period that they anticipate flaring for, until the equipment is fixed, over 1.2 million US in fine, in fees for flaring. So we have made, we're working hard to improve the sector, but these guys, as with everything else, left a total mess. And that is what people don't understand, that the last few months, we can't talk just about achievements, but how much of our time has been spent cleaning up things that they have left in a mess, including on the environment side. No, we've lost global standing on the environment. We used to be the go-to country for REDD+ and activities and for advancing the model for trading in forest carbon. Nobody, in the last 5 years, nobody even paid attention to us because we are missing. Now we are trying to rebuild that global profile on the environment side. So we have to look at what we lost opportunity because of the incompetence, and don't talk about the corruption. I can come to that and tell you about all it would require an entire program to talk about the corruption on the app.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we know the Stabroek block, based on reports, they have substantial concentration of oil and gas there. We don't know how much the Kanji and the Kaitro block has at this point in time, but as you said, when those PSA comes up for negotiation, it will be different. Now, as you suggested, when you approve Payara, there's more control there. As you go on to the different wells within the Stabroek block, like the Yellowtail is the next, will there be additional safeguard and additional funds coming to Guyana for, I know you cannot change the 2%, as you said, the corporation tax structure is still the same. Can any of those be changed with giving additional wells?
What has happened is the stability clause that they have as part of the PSA. So the moment you institute that, they have an agreement where the government will pay their taxes. That's what Trotman signed on to. So we had to make it clear that the fee that for fine, the flaring, cannot be cost recoverable. Will not be cost recoverable. But that would basically partly finding ourselves. Right? So that is how we are working. Move forward. We have made it clear, forget the Yellowtail for the time, that we have to seek additional benefits from the current situation, regardless of the Stabroek PSA. So under the PSA, it sets up a pricing structure for gas. We have made it clear that the first 50 million cubic feet per day of gas that will come in to power the 250 megawatts power plant that would supply all of Guyana with electricity, right? Double our capacity now. That we're negotiating not to pay anything for that, or a minimal sum, but that is where we are negotiating not to pay anything. That in itself runs up into multiple millions US dollars of benefit, because it's 15 million cubic feet of gas per day. And if that can come in free to the people of this country, that brings additional benefit. So we are working on the local content side. We have made it clear it's not just the revenue to the government, but the sector, the country must benefit from the industry. So we are making it, we're spending now $20 billion on the 3 projects. But right now, a small sum is being spent here. So that is why we are pushing local and having specific carve-outs for Guyanese, where only Guyanese would be allowed to supply these services in these areas. For example, rental services, security services, logistics services, cleaning services, those kinds of things that would be done, transportation services, exclusively for our people. And then a share of the more advanced forms of spending, that is like to insurance and fabrication and stuff, and constantly to grow that share. We've made it clear to ExxonMobil that they have to invest in training people, and they have agreed to that. So we are trying to seek additional benefits from this. On the shore-based facilities, we're promoting Guyanese ownership of shore-based facilities because they will service the industry. We're pushing now to have a lot of the services that are done from Texas and Trinidad and Tobago to come to Guyana. This will generate more jobs here. So it's an entire plan for the future. But as we go forward, from Payara to Yellowtail, we constantly seek to strengthen the licenses.
That's great news, Mr. Vice President. It's nice to hear what you just said, and it brings kind of soothing to the soul, knowing that what you said there, if Exxon can finance the pipe that bring in the gas to shore, that would be a great achievement for Guyana. And that's why the people of Guyana elected you to be the government. So it's on your shoulder. And Mr. Vice President, I'm glad you mentioned the local content. That's one of the reasons why we submitted to you that proposal to get the diaspora together to pool their resources so we can invest in those things. And we can have all the machinery, all the equipment, all the technical skills that we need. I hope we can relook at our proposal to you and maybe we can continue that discussion.
A lot of our people are just looking for a job in the government, in the sector. That's not where the big money is.
That's correct.
They have to come down here. They have to start buying up a piece of land, looking at what the requirements of the oil companies to rent the office space for. Office space would be crucial for rentals for their staff. They have to come and set up a logistics company or buy a fleet of vehicles of a standard and come down here and bid for a contract. That's where the money is. You know, the accounting services, etc. Don't come and work with government. You go and set up a business that would service the industry. That is where we're hoping to drive our people. But everything I see 50 CVs for one job from the diaspora. You know, like one job, and the job is not even high-paying job. And so people have to have that nuanced perspective of how they can benefit from these resources here.
Excellent. Mr. Vice President, let's move on from that and let's talk to some other things. Let's talk foreign affairs. It is reported that there are many vacancies in our consulates and embassies. When can we expect these vacancies to be filled?
I'm aware that the matter is now being addressed by the president. So you should see some changes and filling of the vacancies above. But we are clear about what our is, and not just on the matter with Venezuela, or a case at the ICJ. And economic diplomacy is a crucial part of our foreign presence will be crucial part of our foreign presence in the different countries. Of course, service to our diaspora has to rank high in terms of the foreign affairs agenda, but we have a very capable foreign minister, and we hope, we know that this matter will be addressed. We are extremely pleased. I saw APNU with their propaganda again, that the US Biden administration doesn't recognize the Irfan Ali government. Well, I saw the statement by the Secretary of State on the occasion of our independence, and he not only congratulated the country and everything else, but he spoke about collaboration on climate change, or collaboration, and on the fight against narcotics. And you know, APNU was the usual thing. They always say, oh, PPP is back, or you're going to have the drug trade, they're linked to drug dealers, like they say about how PPP killed 400. I saw now in New York, they say we killed 1,480. It moved up from 400, which has been disproved. That young Afro-Guyanese kids. You have some crazy people here in New York too. You have some really crazy people in the diaspora. Well, I don't want to disparage you all, but I want to take you. You know, they always say that PPP is linked to drug dealers, but I pointed out that the people who were actually mostly linked to drug dealers. I remember the guy who was extradited from Jamaica, Big Ed, to the US. When he opened up his facility, at the opening, you had the entire APNU leadership there almost at the opening of his facility. The one who you recall, the guy who shipped the stuff or is wanted and for questioning for the shipment to Belgium, the large shipment. He is very close to APNU too. He disappeared. And they recently talked about this Suriname issue. We've had 2 seizures there. Had we APNU been in office, I don't think we would have had any seizure. So they would like to believe, people to believe, oh, in 5 years, we didn't have much of this because there was no drug trafficking. The drug traffickers went to church for the last 5 years under APNU and became God-fearing. And now, once the PPP is back, they now start doing drugs again. The fact is that they undermine the enforcement agencies. The enforcement agencies didn't really go after the drug traffickers because many of them were cozy and many of them had lawyer friends in the APNU. But bevy of lawyers, you should look at who their clients are. So I'm very pleased on the external side about the relationship with the US too, how that is evolving on the democracy front. You saw the issue with the IRI. They didn't want IRI in Guyana, but IRI supported them. I think, Charles, at that time you were part of that apparatus, you and Skid Rose with the IRI like the boss.
I'm not sure about Mr. Vice President. I'm not sure.
So you were very warmly embraced the IRI people. Now the people came here and said, we want to see reforms at the GCOM. Suddenly they're cussing out the people. But thankfully, the 2 of you are not.
Dr. Rose?
Mr. Vice President, I want to take a different path. Given the impending removal of Lowenfield, Mingo, and Myers from GCOM, this has placed GCOM into a turmoil situation. Do you think GCOM will be capable of holding local government elections this year?
I think so. It's quite clear that we have capable Guyanese. They were pushed out. You saw the report done by the Ethnic Relations Commission, the last Ethnic Relations Commission, headed by the Pastor Smith, is it? Yeah. Smith, it showed that Roxanne Myers in the recruitment process was selected above the other candidate without any reason. And so we can't have a repeat of that situation. I think we can find good Guyanese professionals who are prepared to act with integrity. I hope people from the diaspora would apply to. And once that is done, they can quickly move to continuous registration to update the list and have a list in time for local government elections. But that's a matter for GCOM. I know the executive has provided the resources for them to hold local government elections, but the conduct of elections is a matter for the constitutional agency, and they have to move swiftly. That is why they can't dilly-dally with getting rid of these people who have proven themselves crooked. And I hope that the process will be a swift one, because nobody needs any convincing that they are not capable or have the integrity to continue with GCOM. They're not.
There have been talk about inclusive governments at every elections, inclusive government. What is your understanding of inclusive government? And do you think that Ghana will ever have an inclusive government that is based on the sharing of power at the executive level between and among political parties?
So we have made it clear. There are a few things that we promised in the manifesto. One was the constitutional reform process. Two was to look at the model at GCOM, examine the model for conduct of elections, and to consult on that, and that obviously requires constitutional change, so it brings bipartisan support. And the third area was to explore the governance model and governance model for the country. And we're still committed to that process. The thing is that you cannot bully the PPP into going this route. And that is what APNU has long felt. They have this age-old discredited philosophy that the PPP will work to pressure. And we have proven ourselves resilient, and we've been here and them wrong. They tried through several means. They tried to support criminals to overthrow the government and install them in Buxton. We know that process. They tried through rigging elections. They tried through street protests. So I saw Norton's campaign platform. He said, vote for me as leader of the PNC because I can protest better than the other candidates. You know, then PPP only understands protests. So my point is that if you have a leadership in the PNC that is prepared to work for the good of the country, that doesn't base its engagement only on racism or the stoking fear among Afro-Guyanese about racism, or try to keep Afro-Guyanese away from the benefits of securing benefits under this government, like the Gold Scholarship. Those who are beneficiary of this scholarship, they were trying to dissuade Afro-Guyanese from applying for the scholarship. Thankfully, people didn't listen to them. But if you have such a leadership that emerges in APNU, then I can see a basis for discussion in the future. But right now, we worked on a model where you can have a more legislative form of power sharing. But if you want to work at the level of the executive, you have to be able to trust each other. If you have an executive that is divided, a cabinet that is divided, it forms a gridlock. You can't achieve anything. That is why you have to have a common platform, a common basis, and a program that you subscribe towards. And the first of it starts for love of this country and a commitment to work for all of its people. That's the first thing, not to base your entire campaign on racism. And that is what APNU has to overcome. And then maybe there is room to talk.
Okay, Now, very early in the campaign, in the last election, President Ali said that he will create 50,000 new jobs in 5 years. Is the government on track to create 50,000 jobs in 5 years?
I think we can do even more. We've had some setbacks because of the COVID, the flooding, and all of that. But given the plans that we have been rolling out, I couldn't talk about all of these when you asked me the achievement. But right now, in many areas, on the oil and gas side, because we are driving the local content so much, things that would have gone for foreigners will go to local people. We believe we can generate more jobs around this supply side for the industry. In Berbice itself, we have moved back to it's harder in these areas. Like we're just partnering with someone in Blackbush Folder to set up a factory so that will be up and running before the end of this year to process vegetables and greens from that area. We're doing the same. The president mentioned little things like a project, 130 million. You know, the swamp shrimp that people from Berbice, any of you, yeah, ask if you from Berbice.
That's
you know,
right.
That little red shrimp that people love so much. Well, they produce 150,000 kilograms now. So we are working now to see a project that will see Berbice produce about 500,000 kilograms, over 1 million pounds a year. Little things based on what people already do. And then we're trying to raise the investment opportunities around the area north of the bridge, the Crab Island area. Once that area gets going, that will be, it's proving a little difficult now, but we'll get it going. Thousands of jobs there, and of course, the sugar industry. But even the housing program, because housing is linked to job creation. We have about 350 houses being built now. And you have nearly 3.
You get a break there again. The internet seems to be audience. We're trying to get back to the VP.
Folks, you're listening to Dialogue on Globespan. We have an intermittent break with the internet. Hopefully, we'll get back online with the VP very, very soon.
The audience, stay there. Don't go away. The VP is really giving some great information. Devin, any luck on? Yeah, the VP is back.
You all have to pay your bills over there. You didn't pay the bills.
It is your internet. You have to let GTT fix that system. Mr. Vice President, yes. I just want to touch on something quickly. No, you know the internet in Ghana is poor, very, very poor. Every time you talk to someone, it's always dropping. But I want to touch on something quickly for you to comment on. We're in the pandemic season. I know you said GWI, Ghana Water Works Incorporated, they employ a lot of people there. But do you think it's right to lay off 150 people in this pandemic season?
The thing is that in a you have to get the agency. Somebody pays for inefficiency. We removed the VAT on water. We reduced the rate for the water rates. We have a duty to get services to every household in Guyana, APNU or PPP household, wherever our people are. That's our job as government, at a rate that they can afford it. Now, when you recruit all of these people, GWI is not an employment agency. This is the old philosophy of APNU. They take a lot of people, stack them up in state agencies, and then by doing that, they're not creating the opportunities for people to go into the private sector or to get other jobs. I'm sure that with the economy expanding, if these are skilled people, they can be absorbed elsewhere. And we have a program to ensure that happens. But our job in government is you have a fiduciary responsibility. Sometimes that is not seen by APNU. They come from this age-old philosophy. Stack up every state agency, raise the taxes, and bankrupt the places. And they have a history of that. We have a job to do that. Now, considering they increase employment from 500 to 1,300, 800 persons more they hired in 5 years, and the whole agency was being run by 500 under the PPP. It is only reasonable that you have to do that if you want to continue to supply water to people. Where do you think the money comes from to support that? It comes from the taxpayers too, the same APNU taxpayers too. So everybody should want efficiently functioning state agencies. Then we take our people who can't be observed in the state agencies and work with them to find good paying jobs by expanding opportunities. APNU's philosophy is forget all the opportunities and everywhere else, the private sector. That is why the entire economy in the non-oil sector just collapsed under APNU. Practically collapsed. We lost 30,000 jobs in the private sector.
I want.
And so that's your old philosophy. That's one thing you not find from the PPP. You wouldn't find that from the BP. And where are the same people who are complaining about 150 jobs now when 7,000 sugar workers were laid off? Where was the outrage then? Or the 2,000 Amerindians, 1,907, who were laid off 2 weeks after APNU got into office?
I got your point, Mr. President, but I must bring this up to you now. Your good friend,
yes, no,
Kaiju News.
If fear is fear. And so people have to, the same people, because it's reverse racism. And so this is the reality of life here.
Your good friend, Kaiju News publisher, Mr. Glenn Lal, has been waging a relentless war on the oil conglomerates. Now he has started a street picketing process to tell the people that they're receiving crumbs in Guyana. Do you think he has a valid point?
Well, I saw some very interesting. I saw some very interesting developments through the picketing exercise, because some staff members said they had to sit through programs with him where he spoke about things he didn't know, and I can testify to that. The gentleman has a perfunctory, a basic understanding of even the elementary sectors of the industry. So he doesn't deal with anything that is technical or so. He has a campaign, and the campaign is, I don't know what motivates the campaign. Oh, the foreigners coming in, taking over everything. And so we can respond to things that have a basis, like how you raised the issue of the PSA and what our take is and where the taxes are going. With him, it's impossible. It's like a moving target. And his only thing is, oh, Guyanese are getting crumbs. So he believes that we must stop working because there's enough oil offshore to feed all of us and give us a high income. And it's far from the truth. So far, in the 2 years from since oil production started, we have only accumulated about $350 million. That's less than if you had to give Guyanese $5,000 a year, right? Every household, with maybe 800,000 households conservatively put. That's $1 billion a year alone. We don't even collect that. And so the guy has he has an agenda, And I think it's political too. So he said change is coming. The two political parties are doing a bad job. But then his staff really exposed that how they were, when they pointed out that he was lying and he didn't know what he was talking about, they were subjected to the most vile abuse. And that is not the way to get started. He is the one who wants to help people to be tolerant to his views, but he's very intolerant to the criticisms, etc. And really, if you look at any sensible person looking at what he says would realize after 15 seconds, if that long, that is a lot of nonsense.
Okay.
Charles, over to you.
Mr. Vice President, we have short time and we have a lot of questions, if you don't mind. I know you can condense your answers. Please ask you to do that. Since my childhood days, we were told Guyana will become the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Is that statement still true, and when will it happen, you think?
Yeah, well, already we're a net food exporter. That we were playing a leadership role in CARICOM, and President Ali recently has committed himself. In fact, he had an engagement with CARICOM and recommitted Guyana to a leadership role in this regard. He has asked that Guyana once again resume as the lead country in CARICOM and the agriculture sector. A committee has been set up to look at the barriers to trade in agricultural sector products. They have resurrected the initiative that I led when I was there, a regional initiative to look at the 9 binding constraints to agriculture in the region and fixing those. We now are moving aggressively to have CARICOM meet at the ministerial level on agricultural issues. And CARICOM will understand, because I recall the only time we had great interest in this was when you had the food crisis and there were shortages of grain around the world. And we're coming to such a situation once again when you would have food shortages around the world for one reason or another. Population pressure, the need to preserve more forested areas, etc. That people will look to the Guyana again as a major producer of food. Already we have several initiatives. You asked in the last 10 months, we've set money in the budget to build a silo and to build a road going into the intermediate savannas, a drying station. Years, because we want in the next 5 to 6 years, we're hoping that we can become self-sufficient in corn and soya for our feedstock industry. Right now we import these from abroad, and we're working with a consortium of Guyanese who use a lot of the corn and stuff, poultry industry, to make some investments in those in the savanna areas. So we're well poised to return to that position, or not to return, but to take more advantage of the multi-billion-dollar food import sector. But we have to dismantle a lot of the barriers in the CARICOM region. You see, what happens there is that some of the businessmen in those countries, they are accustomed to importing food from the US and others. So like chicken, they would import only the cuts. Now the premium part is gone, the breast portion and stuff like that. So they get the legs and the thighs and stuff at a cheap price. So they don't want to buy the chicken from Guyana, so it's up by the sanitary restrictions. But we're selling whole chicken with all the parts, the prime parts too. So they compare those prices, and that can't work. That's like a form of dumping. We'd have to solve all of these issues.
Thank you, Mr. VP. Mr. VP, Albion Asset Manager reported that the next crop coming up in August is in great danger because of the flood. As you know, Albion produced about 50% of Gaisuco sugar. If this report is true, there will be a great setback to the turnaround of Gaisuco. I know the CEO is doing a phenomenal job in restructuring the industry, but this rainfall has created a major setback in achieving their goals in their strategic plan. Will the government continue to support the expansion of Rose Hall and Enmore while at the same time cushion the shortfall in Gaisugo cash flow for its existing operations?
Well, we've already been helping. We have approved the 5% increase in wages and salaries that APNU promised but never paid. So in the 5 years that APNU has been there, the sugar workers got zero. The public servant, the GPSU, if it talks about solidarity and GTUC, the TUC, they never gave solidarity with the industry. They got zero for every year of 5 years. And they had their annual production incentive taken away. And that has been, even before Burnham, from the Burnham days, early days, taken away. The sugar workers have faced the brunt of the racist policies of the APNU AFC government. They got the 5% that we paid for 2019. They got the same sum that was given to the entire public sector in 2020. We have committed that there would be a salary increase, but we have to wait until the negotiations with the entire public sector is concluded for 2021. We have just given some out-of-crop assistance. We have given billions of dollars for the capital program. And we are looking, we just had a couple of weeks ago to discuss the entire master plan for the 5 years of turning around sugar. It would involve a number of things, including packaging more processed sugar. We'd have to make a determination between Enmore, because Enmore and the other areas are slated for industrial development too, because not necessarily just sugar related, but to observe the employment where people lost jobs. So we are looking at Enmore for a broader scale industrial that would employ people from the East Coast, East Coast parts of Region 5, to shift more employment into the lower areas, more Haslington, Golden Grove, all of these areas, the Cove and John, and then Fowles coming this way. So we want to do that. So we are deciding now, since Albion, as you correctly pointed out, might be is the area that produces the most sugar and also at a fair, comparatively a lower cost than other areas, that to do more packaging at Albion. So that's being studied now to see if we can install some packaging lines at Albion, upgrade the ones at Blaymont. Because they're complaining about double handling, bringing the sugar to Enmore and stuff like that. So all of these are, of course, there's nothing we can do now. I saw the water in the cane, and it's bad. So we don't know what will happen, but there's a commitment to keep the industry going, because too many people depend on it.
Now, let me just jump in and say this.
Yeah.
I expect you to give 100% support to my twin brother, says a guy so cool.
Mr. VP.
Yeah, but he has to do his work too, not just support.
Yes, you know he is doing a good job.
Yes, their workers are crucial. He has to be working, and he has to be frugal, just like the president that he serves.
Yeah,
you know, Mr. Vice President, you know he's doing a good job. I can't even get to talk to him anymore. How busy he is.
Yeah, all right.
Mr. VP, according to Stabrook News,
I know you're sitting in that one, close friends here too, and you're sitting in that one. And I'm glad like the two of you, took the turn for the better in 2020. No,
Mr. VP, I did the human resource audit there, and the CEO is doing a phenomenal job. I think Gaisugo has a great future. VP, according to Stabrook News, the fire service has deemed City Hall a public hazard. Will your government sit back and see this iconic building collapse?
No, we want to. We have the resources, at least $100 million now, to start the refurbishment of City Hall to restore it to its former glory. There's a commitment by the government to fixing it. If City Hall moves out tomorrow and they hand this project over to us, we'll get it done, because the problem with giving City Hall money is that they don't have audited statements for several years. Several years, you hand it, it's like it just disappears. And then the mayor goes around complaining all the time. So this project can be done. It should be done. The government is committed to doing it. But City Hall has to just get out of the way. They can be part of an oversight body, but they have no means of funding it, yet they're just hanging on there.
Mr. VP, the motorcycle bandit seems to be on the rise. What plans are there to stop this monster from continuing?
Well, I've seen some statistics by the police. I asked them, are these statistics secret? And they said no. They can share this with the public, and I think they've shared it with the media. Now, a lot of this gets reported, and it's on Facebook now, and a lot of people have cameras, so you see more of it. They assured me that and I saw the stats, they shared it at the Defense Board, that serious crime has been reduced by 20% or so. One crime has gone up. They've seen an increase in rape. That was the one that the statistics showed. And so they are required to give that and share it with the public. Notwithstanding that, this matter has been brought to their attention by I know the president. He's very, very concerned about this issue, because safety is a crucial issue, and security is a crucial issue. So the police were directed to ensure that they put in place mechanisms to go after people. Many of them are known characters. That's one. Two, we are looking at more structural issues though. We have a Safe City program with 200 odd cameras. We are now looking at what it will take to cover the entire country with these cameras that can be centrally monitored, so that you can have real-time view of what's going on in each area across the country, where the hotspots are, and to deploy forces. You're also working at decentralizing the police force, especially quick response units, to the region, so that they have a capability of tackling serious crime. Now, this is an area that the president is leading himself, and I'm sure that we'll make significant progress in this regard.
Dr. Rose?
No, I just want to close by saying to you, Vice President Jagdeo, I want to thank you for being on the program at such a short notice. You've been very gracious to us, and I hope in the future you come back sometime.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Mr. Vice President, any in closing?
Nothing. Just say to the diaspora, those who are looking, get involved. This is our country. And they have to be part of this fight back on racism. You know, don't allow a few spent politicians to determine the future of our country. The young people would have to inherit this, so they should be very intolerant of people who only see a zombie behind every bush, racism, etc. all day long. They can't come out of that framework. And if the bulk of the people of this country say we are not going to allow them to succeed, they can't succeed in dividing our people. And so make full use of the opportunities. I'm so glad that so many people applied for the scholarship programs. There'll be much more expansion of education, healthcare, everything, and the government wants you to be involved. And on the people who are suffering so badly because of the floods, I want them to know that we understand the pain they're going through, the agony of seeing their lives change for the worse. The government shall be there in assisting them to get back on their feet. Thank you very much.
And
Mr. Vice President, when you come into the United States, to North America?
We come soon. I haven't traveled a long time. But when maybe the flooding, we've assisted people a bit here and stuff, then maybe we think about coming here too. And on the COVID side, I want to urge people who may be working to go. We've had a setback in terms of the vaccine, the arrival of the second dose of the Sputnik vaccine. It's not the same as the first dose because it's two components, component A and component B. So we can't, although we have a lot of first doses now, 100,000 arrived today. We have a delay in that, but it doesn't matter because you can take it between 4 weeks to 3 months. But a lot of people were given on their cards 4 weeks. So, but they still have time to before the 3 months expire. So we are trying to get the supplies in. But our country has done, compared to many other countries, we have already vaccinated about 40-something% of our adult population. With the vaccines here available, that would take us to over 60% of the population. In the US, when I look at the app, about 50-something%. Some states are in 40s and some are close to 70 in the US, but on average, it's about just over 50. And so when we have done this with great difficulty because we can't get supplies from any of the developed countries, we have tried hard. We wrote the US government, we wrote every other government, but we have been trying to secure the supplies from different parts of the world. And that comes with its own difficulty. But we're hoping all of our people would get vaccinated so we can open up back the country fully, hopefully by October, so if everyone gets vaccinated.
And I want to thank you, Mr. Vice President. You're so eloquent in your answers. You speak from a background of great knowledge in policy and what is going on. And we want to thank you so much for gracing us this evening on Globespan. We want to thank Nohar Singh and Devin for making this platform available to us. And to all our audience out there, we want to thank you for being with us tonight. Here from New York, God bless you all and God bless our great country.